A mother discovers that the college savings she's been building for her daughter has suddenly vanished. She learns her husband secretly drained it to impress another woman. Just when everything seems lost, their 12-year-old daughter outsmarts him in a shocking way that no one saw coming. The story is about betrayal, heartbreak, and a child's clever revenge that left everyone stunned. I never imagined that the man I trusted most could betray me in such a cruel way. For years, I had worked quietly, setting aside every extra dollar, cutting corners where I could, all for one single purpose: my daughter's future. That money wasn't just numbers in a bank account. It was the promise of a college education, the assurance that she would never have to struggle the way I did. Every time I packed lunch instead of buying out, every time I skipped a new pair of shoes, I reminded myself, it's worth it because this is for her. But one evening, when I sat down to review the account, my hands froze. The balance that should have been there nearly wiped out. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake, maybe a banking error. I checked again, and again. The number on the screen refused to change. My chest tightened as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Years of sacrifice had disappeared overnight. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, but what came next was worse. I discovered it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. My husband, the man who had sworn to protect our family, had drained the fund. Not for bills, not for an emergency, but to shower another woman with gifts, jewelry, vacations, lavish dinners, all paid for with the savings meant for our daughter's future. I wanted to scream,
to throw something,
to demand answers. But in that moment, words failed me. I just stared at him, stunned, my heart cracking into pieces. His excuses tumbled out like weak confessions. He was lonely. He made a mistake. He didn't think it would matter. Every word felt like poison. Didn't matter? Our daughter's dreams didn't matter? My years of sacrifice didn't matter? For days, the house felt like a storm had passed through, leaving only silence and broken trust behind. I tried to keep strong for my daughter. She was only 12, too young to understand the ugliness of betrayal, or so I thought. But children see more than we realize. She noticed the tension, the quiet arguments, the way I cried when I thought she was asleep. One night, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "Mom," she whispered, "why are you sad?" I tried to brush it off, but her eyes searched mine with such determination that I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I told her, carefully, that the money we had saved for her future was gone, and that her father had taken it.
Her face changed.
Not just hurt, not just confusion, but something else, a spark of resolve. She didn't cry.
She didn't yell.
She just looked at me and said, "Don't worry, I'll fix it." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She was 12. What could she possibly do? But there was a steadiness in her voice that made me pause. She had inherited more than my eyes. She had inherited my strength. Over the next few days, she began observing her father carefully. She noticed his habits, the way he guarded his phone, the times he left the room to take calls. She noticed details that I had overlooked in my pain. And then, quietly, she began to form a plan. I didn't know exactly what she was doing, but I trusted her instincts. She was clever, sharper than most kids her age. She had always loved puzzles, riddles, figuring things out that stumped even adults. But this was different. This wasn't a game. This was our future on the line. One evening, I walked into the living room to find her sitting with his laptop open. My heart raced. "What are you doing?" I whispered, terrified of the consequences if he caught her. But she held up her hand, eyes focused on the screen. "Mom, I found something." It turned out my husband had been careless. In his arrogance, he believed no one would ever check. But my daughter had managed to trace receipts, emails, and messages that revealed everything. Not only where the money had gone, but proof, undeniable proof, of his betrayal. Every transfer, every purchase, every lie neatly documented in his own digital trail. I couldn't believe it. She had done in days what I hadn't been able to do in weeks. She had cracked open the truth with the determination of someone far beyond her years. When she showed me, My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence. This wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation, reckless and shameless. But now, thanks to her, I had power. I wasn't powerless anymore. That night, I confronted him. Not with tears this time, but with cold, hard facts. I laid the evidence in front of him, each file like a dagger on the table. He paled, stammering, his arrogance crumbling into panic. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that he wasn't untouchable. But the real shock came when my daughter spoke. She stepped forward, her voice steady and fierce. "You took my future, but I took yours." She revealed that she had already sent copies of the evidence to his work email, to his boss, to family members who once admired him. She had ensured that the truth could not be buried. The look on his face was indescribable. The man who thought he was the clever one, the manipulator, had been undone by a 12-year-old. His betrayal had not only cost him our trust, it was about to cost him everything else. In that moment, I realized my daughter was no longer a child. She had grown, not by choice, but by necessity. Her courage was a mirror reflecting everything I had ever hoped for her: strength, intelligence, resilience. And though the pain of his betrayal still burned inside me, something else rose stronger: pride. Pride in the girl who refused to be a victim. Pride in the daughter who had saved not just our future, but my dignity. As I watched him crumble, I knew the story wasn't over.
Not yet.
But one thing was certain: he had underestimated the wrong person. And now, the game had changed forever. The silence in that room after my daughter's words was deafening. My husband's face drained of color. His lips trembled as though he wanted to speak, but no words came. For once, the man who always had an excuse, always had a clever lie ready, was struck speechless. And I stood there watching, not with pity, but with the cold satisfaction of a woman who had finally taken back her power. But this wasn't just about punishment.
It was about justice.
The money he stole wasn't his to give, and the trust he shattered couldn't simply be glued back together with empty apologies. He begged, his voice cracking, "Please don't send it. We can fix this. I'll get the money back. Just give me time." I almost laughed. Time? He had already squandered every ounce of trust, every chance I had ever given him. And as he looked at me, desperate, I realized he still didn't understand. It wasn't me he had to answer to anymore. It was her, our 12-year-old daughter, the one he thought was too small, too naive to matter. She stood her ground, her arms crossed, her chin lifted with a strength that startled even me. "You taught me something," she said softly, her eyes burning. "You taught me not to trust words, only actions. And now it's your turn to face the consequences of your actions." He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He muttered promises, swore he would make it right, but the truth hung heavy in the air. There was no undoing what he had done. The messages, the receipts, the bank transfers, they told a story no apology could erase. The days that followed were a blur of fallout. The evidence she had sent out reached everyone. His boss called him in, furious, demanding explanations for funds he had shifted without permission, for the lies that had bled into his professional life. Family members who once looked at him with pride now looked away in shame. The mask he wore for so long had been ripped away, and all that remained was a man exposed for who he truly was. But even as his world crumbled, I focused on protecting ours. With the proof we had, I secured what remained of the savings, locked it away in an account only I controlled. I contacted legal help, ensuring that every cent stolen would be accounted for, that my daughter's future would not vanish into smoke. And through it all, my daughter remained steady. She didn't waver, didn't doubt. Even when I did, I had feared this burden would scar her, that she would lose the innocence a child should hold. But instead, I watched her transform. She didn't let anger consume her. She let it sharpen her. She asked questions, made suggestions, even sat with me as we planned how to rebuild. One evening, as we sat together at the kitchen table, she looked up from her notebook where she had been scribbling ideas. "Mom," she said quietly, He thought he could take away my future. But all he did was show me how strong we are without him. Tears welled in my eyes. Not of sorrow this time, but of awe. She was right. For so long, I had believed my life depended on him, that our stability rested in his hands. But watching him fall apart while she rose stronger proved the opposite. We didn't need him. We never had. Of course, he didn't give up easily. He tried to sway me, showing up with flowers, pleading with letters slipped under the door. He tried guilt, saying I was tearing the family apart. But the truth was clear to both of us. He had torn it apart the moment he chose betrayal over loyalty. The final blow came weeks later. He returned home one evening, his eyes wild with desperation. "They fired me," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The money's gone. The job is gone. Please, just help me. I have nothing left." I looked at him, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of cold clarity. "You had everything," I told him. "A family who loved you. A daughter who trusted you. A future we built together. And you threw it away. Now you have nothing. Not because of us, but because of your own choices." My daughter stood beside me, her small hand gripping mine tightly. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any words. She had already spoken the truth when she outsmarted him, when she revealed the betrayal he thought he could hide. That night, he left. I don't know where he went, and to be honest, I didn't care. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. Not whole. He had left scars that would take time to heal, but free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from the shadow of betrayal. In the months that followed, life wasn't easy. We had to adjust, to rebuild both financially and emotionally. But something beautiful happened in the process. My daughter and I grew closer than ever. We became partners, not just mother and child, but two survivors forging a new path together. She poured her energy into school, into her passions, determined to prove that nothing could stand in the way of her dreams. And I poured mine into making sure she had every tool she needed. Every time I saw her studying late into the night, her brow furrowed in concentration, I felt the sting of betrayal fade just a little more. Because out of the ashes of what he destroyed, she was building something stronger. One day, as I watched her present a science project at school, her voice confident and clear, I realized just how much she had grown. She wasn't just the little girl I had once tucked into bed with bedtime stories. She was becoming a young woman with fire in her heart and wisdom far beyond her years. And though the pain of what he did will always linger like a scar, I know now that we are not defined by what we lost. We are defined by how we rose after losing it. My daughter proved that to me. She turned betrayal into strength, humiliation into victory, and despair into determination. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he ever thinks about what he threw away. If he regrets underestimating the 12-year-old girl who brought him to his knees. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. It doesn't matter anymore. Because our story isn't about him. It's about us. And as I close my eyes, listening to my daughter's laughter echo down the hall, I know one thing for certain. He stole the money, but she stole the victory. And in the end, that was worth far more than anything he could ever take.